you, Commissioner Carr. On page 9 of your testimony, you point out that the Biden-Harris administration's national spectrum strategy has yielded a commitment of 0 spectrum being made available for commercial use, and that's after 3 years of study. You called it a spectrumless spectrum plan, and I agree that making spectrum available for commercial use, especially mid-band spectrum, is crucial for economic and national security. Yet, despite the demand for more spectrum, Biden's spectrum strategy requires no spectrum to be identified for auction, only more studies. And in your testimony, you say maybe many more years of study. So how do we ensure that these studies actually tee up future auctions rather than lead to nowhere?
Well, the country needs a real spectrum strategy. I put out an idea in March of 2021, identify specific frequency bands, amount of megahertz, and years by which we need to take action. That's a spectrum strategy. What happened most recently with the Biden administration is sort of a classic Washington move. Rather than making the hard decisions and deciding it now, we just stand up a commission or further study and kick the can down the road. So we need to turn things around. On average, we're almost 400 megahertz behind 15 other countries right now. When you look at the average across of it, we rank 13 out of 15.
I read that.
We're over 700 megahertz behind China right now. So we got to turn things around. And frankly, we can do a little bit of that at the FCC ourselves. We don't need to wait for the Biden administration to tell us what spectrum bands to move on. We have authority that Congress has given us to identify spectrum bands, and we should be moving on it.
Why are we not moving on it? Why? Why are we not moving? Well, we need to move, okay? The digital discrimination rulemaking is so broad in terms of what the FCC might consider discriminatory that rural broadband providers are concerned that if they do not provide these services in all unserved locations, which is really an impossible task if you live in a rural mountainous region like I have, they'll be falsely characterized as discriminatory. And you're right, they don't have the large funds. They're not large internet providers. And I guess my question to you is, what can the FCC do to ensure that small and rural providers have the necessary clarity around these rules to continue and invest in expansion? They just need clarity.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we need to reverse course at the FCC on that decision. I frankly think it's going to come to the courts, and I do believe the courts are going to reverse the FCC's recent decision. You're right. If you decide to build anywhere, you may be liable because you didn't build everywhere. I mean,
it's up to, how they determine that when you walk in. It's like any other bureaucratic agency.
And look, honestly, the FCC introduced an advisory opinion process, but they also were very clear to say we could reverse course on the advisory opinion at any point in time. So even if you get one, you can't rely on that.
Yeah, exactly. Can you speak about the importance of permitting reform in both broadband and 5G build-out?
Yeah, this is critical. We just talked about a study that showed that large-scale fiber builders were aiming to cover many millions of homes in 2022, and they fell 1 million homes short. And the study cited permitting reform as the number one reason. I was in Casper, Wyoming. I was in a laydown yard outside of a wireless provider's facilities, and they had 90 antennas just sitting there, miles of conduits sitting there ready to go, but they couldn't get the permits. So we're spending all of this money in this country on broadband infrastructure, and we are not streamlining permitting. And that's like stepping on the gas and the brakes at the same time. We're not going to get where we need to go.
So what do we do to fix that?
Fundamentally, we need to start moving on permitting, and the FCC can do that. We can immediately take the reforms that we did on small cells, which interpreted 253 and 332. We could adopt new declaratory rulings that extend those even more clearly into the context of wired infrastructure, and that would help.
Okay, very good. Mr. Carr, the chair's net neutrality proposal highlights national security as a reason for Title II reclassification. This is something we've never heard of before in the decades of net neutrality debate. The market's shown absolutely no justification for broadband reclassification, and the committee is reaching and to try to find any justification, I would say, for regulating the internet. Where did it come from? Help me understand any connection between an open internet and national security.
Yeah, I don't see it. I think this was what this goes back to. Again, it's 2017. We were told all sorts of stories. We need Title II because the internet will slow down. We need Title II, otherwise you'll be charged per website. And none of that came to pass.
Yeah.
But restoring Title II is sort of religion among some in the DC quarters. And so you have to come up with some reason for doing it again. And so we invoke national security. But there's nothing that I've seen at all that suggests that there is some gaping gap in our national security that can only be solved by Title II. But if there is something that exists, then let's come to Congress and get a rifle shot legislation that deals with it. We shouldn't be imposing Title II on the entire internet ecosystem But again, there is nothing that I've been briefed on or made aware of that Title II would solve. DHS, CSIS, all these agencies have lots of authorities. It can't be that we are completely exposed to a foreign government, but for the fact that a 1930 law happens to exist.
Well, we're in the 21st century, so with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.